Hi everybody, welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story. So, sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea. Tonight we finish Erin Hunter's Midnight, the first book in the New Prophecy series of Warrior Cats. Chapter 23. Brambleclaw stared at the apprentice for a moment before opening his mouth and tasting the air for himself. Squirrelpaw was right. The salt tang was unmistakable, carrying him back to his dream and the bitter taste of the water that had surged around him. "It is salt," he meowed. "We must be close. Come on." He raced into the wind, with the sun dazzling his eyes. A swift glance behind showed that his companions were following. Even Tawnypelt was managing to hobble faster. Brambleclaw felt new strength pouring into his limbs, as if he could go on running forever until he soared into the fiery sky like one of the white birds that wheeled and screamed above them. Instead, he came to a skidding, terrified halt on the edge of a huge cliff. Steep, sandy slopes fell away, barely a mouse length in front of his paws. Waves crashed at the bottom, and stretching out ahead of him was the heaving expanse of blue-green water. The sun was sinking into it on the horizon, its flames so bright that Brambleclaw had to narrow his eyes against them. The orange fire burned a path like blood across the water, almost reaching the foot of the cliff. For a few moments, no cat could do anything but stare. Then Brambleclaw shook himself. "We've got to hurry," he meowed. "We have to find the cave with teeth before it gets dark." "And then we wait for midnight," Feathertail added. Brambleclaw glanced from side to side, but he couldn't see anything to tell him which way to go. Choosing a direction at random, he led the way along the cliff top. From time to time, they stopped and peered over the edge to look for a cave. Brambleclaw dug his claws firmly into the tough grass. It was too easy to imagine slipping over and falling into the hungry waves. Gradually, the land sloped down, until the water was only the height of a tree below them. The cliff top jutted out so they could not see the bottom, and the almost sheer surface was deeply scored with ancient runnels of rain. As the cliff grew less steep, the cats scrabbled a little way down and made their way along closer to the water, sometimes even within reach of a salty burst of wave. Clefts riven by ancient streams split the rock, sometimes so wide that the cats had to leap over them, and the grass frequently gave way to hollows where a few twisted shrubs clung to the scant soil. "There are plenty of places to shelter for the night if we don't find the cave," Stormfur pointed out. Brambleclaw was beginning to think they might need to find somewhere to stop. The sun had sunk beneath the water by now, though great orange flares still streaked the sky. The breeze was growing colder. Tawnypelt at least could lie down, he thought, while the rest of them went on searching. His sister had fallen a little way behind. Brambleclaw was just bounding back to her, skirting the edge of one of the clefts, when his paws slipped and he found himself sliding helplessly into the hollow. He scrabbled at the loose soil, but it gave way under his claws, showering him with dirt. He kept on sliding. In the shadows he could not see the bottom, and he let out a yowl of alarm. "Brambleclaw!" Stormfur leapt into the hollow beside him, and tried to sink his claws into Brambleclaw's shoulder. But Brambleclaw felt more of the soil give way, and they both slid downward more rapidly than before. Soil spattered over Brambleclaw's face, stinging his eyes and choking him. From somewhere above he heard an ear-splitting yowl, and Squirrelpaw launched herself practically on top of him. "No, go back," he choked out, getting a mouthful of soil. Then even the shifting soil vanished, and there was nothing beneath him at all. He fell, howling, for a few terrified heartbeats, and landed with a thump on damp pebbles. For a moment he lay stunned. A booming echo thundered in his ears, and he felt as if the whole world were spinning around. Then he opened his eyes and stared in horror as he saw the shape of a massive, gaping mouth with teeth closing on him, outlined against the red evening sky. He tried to scramble up, but a sudden rush of water swept him off his paws. His yell of terror was cut off abruptly as water swirled into his mouth with the terrifying salt taste of his dream. Brambleclaw flailed with all his strength, but the waves hurled him mercilessly toward the teeth and then tossed him back again, far under the cliff. He did not know where he was or which way he should try to swim. Water filled his eyes and ears, roaring around him. He gasped for breath, only to swallow more of the salt water. His frantic struggles were growing weaker, and the cold, stifling waves were closing over his head when he felt a sharp pain in one shoulder. Suddenly, the pressure on his fur vanished, and he could breathe again. Coughing up water, he turned his head and saw Squirrel Paw's eyes blazing at him, her teeth fastened firmly in his fur. "No," he gasped. "You can't, you'll drown." Squirrel Paw could not reply without letting go of him. Her only response was to kick out strongly with all four paws. Brambleclaw felt pebbles shifting beneath his feet, and then the waves washed them back toward the teeth. Summoning the last scrap of his strength, he thrashed at the water, trying to drive himself and Squirrel Paw away from those spiky rocks. The water surged and lifted them up. He got a brief glimpse of sodden dark gray storm fur, beside him, before the waves sent them crashing down on hard ground. The breath driven out of him, Brambleclaw scrabbled among the rolling pebbles, while the shallow, sucking water threatened to drag him back again. Squirrel Paw, still gripping his shoulder, pulled him up, and he felt another cat give him a shove from behind. At last he collapsed on solid rock and lay still, letting the world drift away. A paw prodding against his flank roused him. "Brambleclaw?" It was Squirrel Paw, sounding desperately anxious. "Brambleclaw, are you all right?" Brambleclaw opened his mouth and let out a moan. His fur was soaked, and he was ice cold. He felt too exhausted to move. Every muscle shrieked with pain, and his stomach felt distended from all the water he had swallowed. But at least he was alive. He managed to raise his head. "I'm fine," he rasped. "Oh, Brambleclaw, I thought you were dead." As his vision cleared, he could make out Squirrel Paw bending over him. He could not remember ever seeing her look so upset, not even when her father had been angry with her back in the forest. The sight of her troubled eyes urged him to make an effort. He sat up and instantly vomited up several mouthfuls of salt water. "I'm not dead," he coughed. "Thanks to you. You were great, Squirrel Paw." "She took a huge risk." That was Stormfur's voice. The gray warrior was standing over Brambleclaw. With his fur plastered to his body, he looked much smaller than Brambleclaw was used to. He sounded disapproving, and yet there was a glow in his eyes as he looked at Squirrel Paw. But it was a very brave thing she did. And a stupid one. With a start of surprise, Brambleclaw realized that Tawny Pelt was there as well, standing close by with water washing around her paws, and her eyes narrowed in anger. "What if you both drowned?" "Well, we didn't," Squirrel Paw flashed at her. I could have helped with an infected bite." Stormfur pressed his muzzle briefly against Tawny Pelt's flank. "StarClan know how you managed to get down here at all." "I fell like the rest of you." Tawny Pelt's voice was wry, and she relaxed a little as she looked at Squirrel Paw. "I'm sorry," she meowed. "You were brave. It's just that I'm finding it hard being injured and not able to help. Like you, I thought we'd lost Brambleclaw for good." But now Brambleclaw was beginning to feel better, enough to look around and recognize the cave of his dream. He was inside it. The gaping mouth, with its ring of teeth, was at one end. Water washed through it in a strange, ceaseless rhythm, crashing with a roar and then hissing out again, rolling the pebbles over the floor as it went. The rock walls were smooth and round. The ground sloped upward to the back of the cave. which was lost in shadows. The only light came through the mouth and from a small hole high in the roof, where Feathertail and Crowpaw were peering anxiously down. "Are you all right?" Feathertail called. "I'm fine." Brambleclaw rose shakily to his paws. "I think we've found what we were looking for." "Hold on, we're coming down," yelled Crowpaw. Brambleclaw almost called out an order to stay where they were, which Crowpaw would certainly have disobeyed, but when he looked more closely he could see a series of ledges and clefts in the rock wall where it would be possible to climb safely down, and then get out again. Feathertail and Crowpaw picked their way down carefully until they reached the cave floor and stood looking around, blinking. "Do we have to stay here until midnight?" Squirrelpaw asked, raising her head from licking her damp chest fur. Her voice echoed strangely around the walls. "I suppose," Brambleclaw began, then stopped, his muscles tensing. From the darkness at the back of the cave came a heavy, scratching noise. A powerful, rank scent reached his nostrils. A shadow moved, not wholly black, but patched with white. Then, lumbering into the dim light, came a shape that was terrifyingly familiar, one of the deadliest enemies of the forest cats, a badger. Chapter 24. Brambleclaw glanced wildly over his shoulder, but there was nowhere to flee except into the water. The difficult climb back to the hole in the cave roof would take too long. Guilt crashed over him with the cold force of waves that had almost drowned him. All his visions, all his certainty, had led his companions to this dreadful place, where they would find no knowledge, no vision from StarClan, only a pointless and horrible death. What use were faith and courage now, when they were trapped like rabbits in a hole? Crowpaw had flattened himself to the ground and was creeping forward with his teeth bared in a snarl. Stormfur was edging around the badger to attack it from the side. Despairingly, Brambleclaw knew that they were heading to meet their death. Even all 6 of them, weak and starving as they were, and worn out by their travels, and the struggle in the water, could not hope to defeat a badger. Caught as they were by the choking waves, it would not be long before the blunt claws and snapping jaws picked them off one by one. The badger had paused on the edge of the shadows that filled the back of the cave. Its powerful shoulders were hunched, and its claws scraped on rock. Its head swung to and fro, the white stripe glimmering, as if it were deciding which of them to attack first. Then it spoke. "Midnight has come." Brambleclaw's mouth fell open. For a moment he felt as if the ground had given way beneath him. That a badger could speak, could say words he understood, words that actually meant something. He stared in disbelief, his heart pounding. "I am Midnight." The badger's voice was deep and rasping, like the sound of the pebbles turning under the waves. "With you I must speak." "Mouse dung!" Crowpaw spat. The Winclin apprentice was still crouched ready to spring. "Make one move and you'll have my claws in your eyes." No, Crowpaw, wait." The badger's throaty laughter interrupted Brambleclaw. "Fierce, is he not? StarClan have chosen well, but there will be no clawing this day. Here is talk, not fight." Brambleclaw and his companions uncertainly looked at each other, their tails bristling. Crowpaw put words to what they were all thinking. "Are we going to trust it?" "What else can we do?" Feathertail responded, blinking. Brambleclaw weighed up the badger again. It was smaller than the one he had seen at Snake Rocks, probably a female, but no less dangerous for that. Leaving what she said went against everything he had been taught as a kid. Yet, so far, she made no move to attack them. He even thought that he could make out a gleam of humor in her eyes. He glanced back at his friends. Crowpaw, Stormfur, and Feathertail might have managed to fight well, but he and Squirrelpaw were exhausted from their near drowning, while Tawny Pelt had sunk down onto the floor of the cave with her injured shoulder held awkwardly, and hardly seemed to be conscious. "Come," the badger rasped. "All night we cannot wait." Brambleclaw knew for certain that this was no ordinary badger. Never before had he heard of a badger who could speak in a language that cats understood. Still, less one that spoke of StarClan, as if she knew more of their wishes than any cat alive. "Feathertail's right," he hissed. "What choice do we have? She could have turned us all into crow food by now. This must be what Blue Star meant in my dream when she told me to listen to midnight. She didn't mean a time at all." Turning to the badger, he asked out loud, You are midnight, and you have a message for us from StarClan?" The badger nodded. "Midnight am I called, and it was shown to me that here I would meet with you, though 4 were numbered to me, not 6. "Then we'll listen to what you have to say," Brambleclaw told her. "You're right, 4 were chosen, but 6 have come, and all deserve to be here." "But make one wrong move," Crowpaw threatened. "Oh, shut up, Mousebrain," Squirrelpaw growled. "Can't you see? This is what we came here to find. Listen to what Midnight tells us. This is Midnight." Crowpaw glared at her through the gathering darkness, but did not reply. Midnight turned with the single word, "Follow," and headed for the back of the cave. Brambleclaw could just make out the dark opening of a tunnel. Taking a deep breath, he meowed, "Okay, let's do it." Stormfur took the lead, with Crowpaw just behind him. Brambleclaw hoped that the apprentice would stop looking for a fight long enough to hear what the badger had to say. Feathertail gently nudged Tawnypelt to her paws and lent her shoulder for support as she staggered into the tunnel. Brambleclaw exchanged a glance with Squirrelpaw and was surprised to see that in spite of her wet, exhausted state, her eyes were sparkling with excitement. "What a story we'll have to tell when we get home," she meowed, getting up and trotting into the tunnel after Feathertail. Brambleclaw brought up the rear, with a final glance over his shoulder at the rocky teeth that framed the mouth of the cave, and the waves that still surged back and forth. The last crimson rays of the drowned sun still stained the sky. In a single heartbeat, Brambleclaw seemed to see an endless river of blood pouring down upon him, filling his ears with the screams of dying cats. "Brambleclaw?" Squirrelpaw's voice cut through the terrified sounds. "Are you coming?" The vision was gone. Brambleclaw found himself back in the wave-filled cave to see that the color was rapidly fading from the sky, and a single warrior of StarClan shone down on him. Shivering, he followed his friends and Midnight. The tunnel sloped upward. Brambleclaw could see nothing in the pitch darkness, but he felt sandy soil beneath his paws rather than pebbles or rock, as well as the wary cat scent of his friends. There was a powerful reek of badger. Then he came out into another cave. Fresher air moved against his fur, and at the far end a hole led into the open. A faint silvery gleam filtered through it, telling Brambleclaw that outside the moon was crossing the sky. By its light he saw that this cave had been dug out of the earth, with twisting roots entangled in the roof and the floor covered with a thick layer of bracken. Feathertail was already helping Tawnypaw to make a nest among the soft fronds, and settled down beside her to lick her wound again. "You have injury?" Midnight asked the ShadowClan warrior. "What gave it?" "It's a rat bite," Tawnypelt replied through gritted teeth. The badger made a spitting noise. "Is bad. Wait." She vanished into the shadows at one side of the cave and returned a moment later with a root clamped in her jaws. "Burdock root!" Squirrelpaw exclaimed, with a triumphant glance at Brambleclaw. "You use it too." "Good for bite, good for infection, good for all sores." The badger chomped up the root and laid the pulp on Tawnypaw's wound, just as Squirrelpaw had done in the wood. "Now," she went on, when she had finished, "it's time for talk." She waited until all the cats had settled themselves among the bracken. Brambleclaw felt his excitement rising. He was only just beginning to realize that they had reached the end of their journey. They had found the place where StarClan had sent them, and now they were about to hear what Midnight had to tell them. "How is it you can speak to us?" he asked curiously. "I have traveled far, and many tongues have learned," Midnight told him. "Tongues of other cats who speak not same as you. Of fox and rabbit also," she grunted. "They speak not of interest. Fox talk is all of kill. Rabbit has thistledown for brain." Squirrelpaw let out a merow of laughter. Bramaclaw could see that her fur lay flat again, and her ears were pricked. "So what do you want to tell us?" she meowed. "Much. In good time," replied the badger. "But first, tell me of your journey. How came you from your tribes?" Stormfur looked puzzled. "Tribes?" Midnight shook her head irritably. "My brain thistled down also. Forget which sort of cats here. You say clans, not?" "That's right," meowed Bramaclaw. He nudged away the uneasy thought that there were other cats like them, not loners, who lived in clans known as tribes. They had not seen them on their journey. They probably lived far in a different direction. With the others to help him, he began the story of their journey, from the first dreams the four of them had shared, to his own dream of the sun-drowned place and the decision to leave the forest. Midnight listened intently with a low chuckle as the cats told her of their misadventures with Purdy, and an understanding nod when they described how they had all, in the end, received their own saltwater sign. "So here we are," Bramaclaw finished. "We're ready to know what StarClan's message is." "And why we had to come here to find it," Crowpaw added. "Why couldn't StarClan have told us what we needed to know back in the forest?" His tone was still hostile, as if he had not accepted that Midnight was not a threat. But that didn't seem to bother the badger. Feathertail flicked her tail out in a calming gesture, and at her touch the WindClan apprentice relaxed a little. "Think, small warrior," Midnight replied to his question. "When you set out, you were 4, 6 with friends who would not stay behind. Now you are 1. Her voice grew deeper and seemed to Bramaclaw to be full of foreboding as she went on. "In days coming, all clans must be 1. If not, trouble destroy you." Bramaclaw felt icy claws rake down his spine. The shudder that ran through him had nothing to do with his sodden fur. "What is the trouble?" he whispered. Midnight hesitated, her deep, dark gaze resting on each cat in turn. "You must leave the forest," she growled at last. "All cats must leave." "What?" Stormfur leaped to his paws. "That's mouse-brained. There have always been cats in the forest." The badger heaved a long sigh. "No longer." "But why?" Feathertail asked, anxiously kneading her paws on the bed of bracken. "Two legs," Midnight sighed again. "Always is 2 legs. Soon they come with machines, monsters in your world, not? Trees will they uproot, rocks break, the earth itself torn apart. No place left for cats. You stay, monsters tear you apart too. And you starve with no prey." There was silence in the moonlit cave. Bramaclaw struggled with the dreadful vision the badger had summoned. He imagined 2-legged monsters, huge shining things in bright unnatural colors, roaring through his beloved camp. He could almost hear again the screams he had heard in the cave with teeth, though now they were all terrified cries of his clan mates as they fled. Everything in him strained against what he had heard. Yet he could not tell Midnight that he did not believe her. Every word she had spoken was filled with truth. "How do you know all this?" Stormfur meowed quietly. There was no challenge in his voice, only a desperate need for an explanation. "It happened to my set many seasons ago. I have seen all before, and I can see what will come now. Just as the stars speak to you, they talk to me also. All that you need to know is written there. It's not hard to read once you know." "No more sunning rocks," Squirrelpaw mewed in a small voice. She sounded as scared as a kit without its mother. "No more training hollow. No more 4 trees?" Midnight shook her head, her eyes tiny bright berries in the shadows. "But why would the 2 legs do that?" Bramaclaw demanded. "What harm have we ever done to them?" "Is no harm," Midnight replied. 2 legs hardly know you there. They do it for build a new thunder path. Go here, there, more faster." "It won't happen." Crowpaw stood up with a fierce gleam in his eyes, as if he were ready to take on the whole race of 2 legs single-pawed. "StarClan won't allow it." "StarClan cannot stop it." Crowpaw opened his mouth to protest again, but nothing came out. He looked utterly bewildered to think of a disaster that was beyond the power of StarClan to stop. "Then why did they bring us here?" mewed a faint voice. Tawnypelt had raised her head from her nest of ferns to fix her gaze on Midnight. "Are we supposed to go home and watch our clans being destroyed?" No, indeed, injured warrior. The badger's voice was suddenly gentle. For hope is given to you, hope you shall bring. You must lead your clans away from the forest and find new home. Just like that, Crowpaw let out a snort of disgust. I'm supposed to go to my clan leader and say, sorry, Tallstar, we've all got to leave. He would claw my ears off if he didn't die laughing first. Midnight's reply rumbled from deep in her chest. When you reach home, I think you will find that even your clan leaders will listen. Terror seized Brambleclaw. What more had the badger seen in the stars? When they returned to the forest, would they find that the destruction had already begun? He sprang to his paws. We must go now. No, no, Midnight shook her head from side to side. Time is for rest tonight. Hunt in moonlight. Eat well. Let injured friends sleep. Tomorrow is better for travel. Brambleclaw glanced at his friends and nodded reluctantly. That makes sense. But you haven't told us where to go, Feathertail pointed out, her blue eyes full of trouble. Where can we find another forest where all the clans can live in peace? Fear not, you will find far from two-leg places where is peace. Hills, oak woods for shelter, running streams. But how? Brambleclaw persisted. Will you come with us and show us? No, Midnight rasped. Much have I traveled, but no longer. Now enough is this cave. Roar of sea, wind and grasses. But you will not be without a guide. When returned, stand on great rock when silver pelt shines above. A dying warrior, the way will show. Fear clutched harder at Brambleclaw. Midnight's words sounded more like a threat than a promise. One of us will die, he whispered. I did not say. Do so, and you will see. Evidently, the badger was not prepared to say more, if indeed she knew. Brambleclaw did not doubt her wisdom, but he realized that not everything had been revealed to her. His breath grew shaky as he caught a glimpse of other powers beyond StarClan, perhaps a power so great that the whole blaze of Silverpelt was no more than the dazzle of moonlight on water. Okay, he meowed, letting out a long breath. Thank you, Midnight. We'll do as you say. And now we'd better hunt, added Stormfur. Dipping his head in deep respect to the badger, he padded past her, up the tunnel and out into the night. Crowpaw and Feathertail followed him. Squirrelpaw, you stay with Tawnypelt, Brambleclaw mewed. Rest and get your fur dry. To his surprise, Squirrelpaw agreed without question, even giving his ear a quick lick before settling down in the bracken beside his sister. Brambleclaw watched them for a moment, realizing how much they meant to him, even the pesky ginger apprentice, whom he had tried so hard to leave behind. Stormfur and Feathertail, too, were true friends, and even Crowpaw had become an ally he would want beside him in any battle. You were right, he meowed thoughtfully to Midnight. We have become one. The badger nodded gravely. In days to come, you need each other, she pronounced the words with all the force of a prophecy from StarClan. Your journey not end here, small warrior. It only just begins. Epilogue. The long grass beside the Thunderpath parted, and Firestar prowled into the open, the weakening leaf-fall sun shining on his flame-colored pelt. Beside him, Greystripe sniffed suspiciously at the air. Great StarClan, it smells foul today, he exclaimed. Cloudtail and Sandstorm padded up to join them, and Leafpaw, the last member of the patrol, turned away from the clump of marigold she was examining. Cloudtail let out a snort of disgust. Every time I come up here, it takes me all day to get the reek out of my fur, he complained. Sandstorm rolled her eyes, but said nothing. You know, there's something strange about today, Firestar meowed, glancing up and down the Thunderpath. There aren't any monsters in sight, but the smell's worse than ever. And I can hear something, Leafpaw added, her ears pricked. The wind carried a deep-toned roaring sound toward the group of cats, faint with distance, but growing gradually louder. Cloudtail turned to his clan leader with a puzzled look in his blue eyes. What's that? I've never heard. His voice trailed off, and he stood gaping. Over a rise in the Thunderpath came the biggest monster any of the cats had seen in their lives. Sunlight dazzled off its gleaming body, and its shape rippled in the heat rising from the surface of the Thunderpath. Its throaty roaring grew and grew until it seemed to fill the whole forest. It came slowly, followed by another and yet another. Two legs swarmed over them like ticks, yowling at each other, their words all but drowned by the roar of the monsters. Then, as the leading monster drew abreast of the 5 watching cats, the unthinkable happened. Instead of going past, it swerved, crunched over the narrow strip of grass that edged the thunder path, and headed straight for them. "What's going on?" Greystripe gasped as Firestar howled, "Scatter!" He dived for cover into a clump of bracken, while his deputy fled deeper into the forest and turned to stare out from underneath a thorn bush. Cloudtail shot up the nearest tree and crouched in the fork between 2 branches, gazing down. Sandstorm headed into a narrow gully with a trickle of water at the bottom, pausing to look back only when she reached the other side, her fur bristling in mingled shock and anger. Leafpaw followed her and flattened herself in the long grass. The monster barreled forward on huge black paws that crushed everything in its path. As all 5 cats watched, frozen and with horror, it rammed its shoulder up against an ash tree. The tree shook under the impact, and then, with a shriek like all the prey in the forest dying at once, its roots tore out of the earth. The tree crashed to the ground. The monster rolled on. The destruction of the forest had begun. And that's where we will finish that. I hope everyone enjoyed listening, and I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends, take care. And we'll cut it there for the YouTube podcast, so I can inform everybody. I will not be live streaming from tomorrow until next Thursday because I will be away from home. So, there will be YouTube videos in its place to take the place of the live streams. So, everybody enjoy the rest of their night.